All right, good morning, kids. I just want to review our Bible story. The last week's Bible story was Esther Becomes a Queen. We worked on pages 107, 108, and let's see here, I believe 109 as well. This week we're going to be taking a look at 110, 111, and 112. So let's quickly review the story about Esther becoming the queen. Let's see here. We know that two important characters were Mordecai and Esther. Mordecai was her adoptive father. They were Jews in another country, in the country of Persia, because the Jews had been taken captive in a war between their countries. Mordecai had offended Haman, who was not a very nice guy. He was kind of full of himself and thought he held a lot of power, when in actuality it was the king who held the power. Haman decided to devise an evil plan by killing all of the Jews just because one person didn't bow down to him. It was not a very nice thing to do. Esther had to be brave and go before the king, but she was afraid because anybody who goes before the king without being invited could be put to death. So let's see here. But Mordecai begged her to intercede on behalf of the Jews. So let's see. We're going to go ahead and move over. Esther showed her courage when she decided to appear before the king without an invitation. Before we begin the story, okay, so last week we had a memory verse. It's still the same verse, so keep reviewing your memory verse. Romans 8:28. The quiz will have 2 questions about your memory verse, just to give you a heads up. Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. Those who are called are those who accept the Lord into their hearts, and God will use them for their purpose. If we love God, we will understand that he works out the details of our lives for our good. Okay. So, why did Esther have courage? That's what I want you to think about. I'm sorry, that was the previous Bible story. Esther becomes the queen. So why did Esther have courage? Because she trusted God. She knew in order to save her people, God used her to intercede with the king and let him know, listen, I am Jewish too. If you're going to kill everybody, that would include me. And the king couldn't have that. He didn't want that. Okay, so what wicked plan did Haman devise? He wanted to kill all the Jews because Mordecai did not bow to him. Haman was kind of full of himself. He was very proud, he lied a lot, probably did a lot of bad things. He got the king to make a law that the Jews would be put to death. How did this law affect Mordecai and Esther? Since they were both Jews, they would be put to death too. Okay, so let's find out what happens when Esther goes before the king. As Esther approached the king, he looked up, surprised to see her, but he immediately held out his scepter for her to touch. He told her that whatever her request was, he would grant it. But all Esther asked was that the king and Haman attend a banquet that would be given in the king's honor. The king readily accepted the invitation for himself and Haman. Esther then left the king's presence, praising God for working everything together for good. In the meantime, Haman proceeded in his plan to kill all the Jews. He went to the queen's banquet and was asked to go with the king to a second banquet the next day. He had huge gallows, which is a stand for hanging people, built because he had planned first to hang Mordecai and then all the Jews that he could find. He was thrilled about his plan. The night after the first banquet, God caused the king to be unable to sleep. To pass the time, he had the history records read to him. In one of the records, he heard about a time when Mordecai had told Esther one of the plot the two men had made to kill the king and how Mordecai had saved the king's life. Haman went the next day intending to ask the king's permission to kill Mordecai. Before Haman could even ask this question, the king asked Haman to advise him about how he should honor a man who had done a great deed for the king. Haman thought he was the one to be honored and not Mordecai. So he said a hero should be given such a kingly robe and should ride on a kingly horse. The royal emblem should be placed on the horse's head. He should ride through the city's streets, being proclaimed a hero. The king then told Haman to do all of these things for Mordecai, the Jew. Haman was very unhappy about having to honor Mordecai and was downhearted that night when he attended the queen's banquet. When Esther revealed to the king that the law Haman had persuaded him to make was against her people, the king became very angry. The king sentenced Haman to be hanged on the gallows that Haman had ordered to be built. Then the king wrote another law. This law said that the Jews could defend themselves against anyone who would try to kill them. God's people were saved from destruction. Mordecai was given the king's ring and Haman's job. God had used Esther to save his people. So here again, we have Romans 8:28. That's going to be our Bible memory verse this week. And we know that all things work together for the good of them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. So just like in Esther's story, it worked out for the good of his people. In this case, the king remembered about how Mordecai had saved his life, and in the end, the Jews were honored. Mordecai was even honored. So what is the name of the man that the king wanted to honor? Can you remember? Starts with an M. If you said Mordecai, pat yourself on the back. You're correct. Esther's cousin was the man. Let's see here. So here again is that question. What was the name of the man that the king wanted to honor? Mordecai. Very good. Did the king hold his scepter out to Esther? Do you guys remember that in the story? He did. Yes, he even told her that he would grant any request that she had. Remember, Esther was afraid to go before the king because if she went before the king without an invitation, it was kind of a bad thing to do. But the king favored her, so he automatically said, hey, I will grant any request you have. Is it ever a good idea to plan and propose to hurt someone else just because of your own pride? No, I don't think it is. What do you guys think? No, God hates pride. Wicked planning always hurts the one who does it. Let's take a look at what happened to Haman. He ended up in not a very good place. All right. So that is for pages 109 and 110. You did 109 last week, and the 110 will be on Monday. For the next pages, 111 and 112. Here we go. We have our Bible memory verse again. Do you remember it? And we know that all things work together for the good of them that call God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. No. At this point, if you want to read your book, the missionary story, A Question of Yams, You may do so. I won't have any homework assigned from it since we're not in the classroom at this time. But if you want to go ahead and read it, that's and it looks like it's supposed to be a really good story. All right. So with the assignment for pages 111 and 112, we're looking at character. Now, a person can have good character or they can have bad character. So on page 111, we're going to be comparing Mordecai and Haman. We know Haman was not such a good guy. At the top of your page, it says character is what we are like. It shows what we do, say, and think. Proverbs 4:18 says that a just person, a person of good character, follows a path that is like the shining sun, shining brighter every day. Mordecai was such a person. Proverbs 6:12 tells what happens to a worthless person, a person of bad character. Haman was such a person. So on page 111, it's asking you to draw what looks like the sun around each of the words that tells what Mordecai was like. You're supposed to draw a rectangle around the words that tells what Haman was like. So if you need to, look up those Bible verses in your Bible and see if you can figure out which word. So for example, we have kind. Do you think that talks about Mordecai or Haman? If you said Mordecai, you would be correct. How about the word below it? Angry. That doesn't sound like a very nice word. Do you suppose does that represent Mordecai or Haman? If you said Haman, you would be correct. Now I want you to complete those Bible pages. Continue on. If you need to, you can look up those Bible verses underneath the word to give you a little guidance if you need to. On page 112, what should you do? These are some situations, and I want you to use your own words. There's really, you try to use complete sentences. I want your opinion on this one. So you need to read each situation and write about what you should do in those situations. What do you think would be the wisest, kindest decision to make in these three situations? And remember, please use complete sentences. All right. I hope this helps out. I miss you guys, and I hope everybody is happy and healthy. All right. God bless y'all.